Manifest, welcome. I'm Dooner. I'm with FreightWaves. I run a show called What the Truck, amongst other things over there. And we're going to have a great panel today on robust reverse logistics. I got some awesome guys with me right here. Jonathan, why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Yep. Hey, everybody. Jonathan Poma. I'm the founder and CEO at Loop Returns. We are returns management software focused on returns and exchanges for Shopify brands.
As you can see, some experts here. We got Gaurav.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gaurav Saran. I'm the founder and CEO for Reverselogix. We're a returns management end-to-end technology platform for the entire life cycle of a return.
Very cool. We got Leif over here from Genesco.
Yeah, Leif Revere from Genesco in Nashville, Tennessee. The director of distribution systems, using Gaurav's product and saving me millions and millions of dollars.
We'd love to hear that.
Well, great. They share all different perspectives here, some on the customer side, some on the 3PL side, and some on the user side. And this is a very relevant topic. I don't know if you guys saw, but about 2 weeks ago, NASDAQ and Salesforce put out data that returns were up 57% from the previous year in the holiday season. In fact, about $1.7 billion of merchandise is getting returned. And if you're in freight, the one thing you know about returns, or at least what used to be true about returns, is that they are freight that nobody wants. It's garbage, it's in the back of the warehouse. Nobody wants to touch it. And we also know that the best return is one that never gets sent back, but that's not going to happen. It's a growing problem. Jonathan, speak a little bit to this holiday season and what you're seeing and what your customers are seeing.
Yeah, so our merchants, obviously our business is growing, but if you just normalize for the merchant, returns were up north of 50% annually. And that's a little bit driven customer expectations. But what we also saw was that refunds as a percentage of returns were down. So the way we talk about that, at least, is when products are gifted, the buyer isn't choosing it, so the returns are going to happen a little bit more frequently. But there is an opportunity to sort of save and nurture that customer relationship and get them a product that they're going to love.
Now, that rests a little bit on your shoulders, making guys like him look good on the 3PL side. They hate this type of freight. How do you make them embrace it? How are you dealing with a season like this, where you said over 50%? That's a lot added to your network.
Yeah, returns have been blowing up, like most of us know, and consumer behavior is a big driver for that. If you look at the numbers from 2021, there was about $761 billion worth of product coming back just in B2C. 2022, that number has exceeded $1 trillion in B2C returns. If you factor in B2B returns, that's another trillion. So the total addressable market here is a $2 trillion market. Now, there's three parts to how this all sets up. One is, what is the brand trying to do? Brand is saying on one side, I want to have a really good consumer experience, post-purchase experience to return the product. But at the same time, the minute a return happens, it's a loss for the brand, no matter what happens to the product. So they're saying, I also want to reduce the loss from the return and maximize the recovery. So consumer behavior for all of us has been, my wife will buy 5 jackets and return 4, and bracketing is a very normal thing. And then you have frequent flyers that return for all kinds of purposes. I'm sure, Jonathan, maybe the jacket is something only for today. But it really depends on what customers are trying to do. And our approach has been, regardless of whether it's an e-commerce brand, an apparel company, or an electronic company, a product is a product. And if it's coming back, we focus more on how do we look at returns holistically, taking into those 3 aspects, from a full view. How do we provide a customer experience for the brand? How do we match that up to the product that's actually coming back? And then allowing for the brands to maximize the recovery.
Now, Leif, you are a director of distribution, right? How do you stay on top of all this, given this context, especially when we're talking about the escalation in returns over the holiday season?
Can I say it's a challenge?
I can imagine.
Definitely. We started COVID, the curse word COVID, we started with customers complaining that they were going 65 to 70 days without getting their money back for returns. And you walked into one of our warehouses and there were just returns as far as the eyes can see. So we looked at that, and again, a part of that $1 billion number that Donner mentioned about returns, we're a piece of that. So we looked at it, and I looked at it from a holistic side, in that we wanted to obviously deal with the immediate problem, deal with the returns that we had, make the returns easier for our customer, and then doing and setting the stage and finding a system for us that allowed us to grow and make returns as a differentiator. We're looking into new technologies and new processes around cost of goods. Those of you who have purchased from Chewy, if If you've got animal lovers, oftentimes they tell you not to keep product, just donate it, because it doesn't make sense for you to return and incur all that cost on their side. So we're peeking into that. We're looking at leveraging the whole supply chain on rerouting returns. Rather than having a return come back to a distro center to be picked again, to be fulfilled for another customer, we want to just pass it from customer to customer and build that family and build that brand loyalty. So a lot of exciting things, and we wouldn't have been able to get there, I don't want to say without COVID, but COVID was the driver, and obviously having a great system backing us up now is going to allow us to grow and leverage some of the new technology.
Jonathan, he said something really interesting right there. He was talking about brand loyalty, using returns as part of your marketing, part of your brand. He mentioned Amazon. We all know that. You buy something, you can go to Whole Foods, you can return it. They've made it very easy, and they've also made it very hard for everybody else. How do you use returns as part of your marketing, as part of that customer experience?
Yeah. So, and when you say you, referring to the brand, right?
Sure.
So how do we talk about returns as part of marketing for the brand? We work with merchants to make sure they're pushing messaging forward into the pre-purchase flow to build confidence and conviction that you can trust a brand, especially when you're buying for the first time online. You don't get to touch the product. You can build confidence and conviction in the purchase flow. We've even seen some of our merchants. Merchant innovation is something that's driven a lot of even our product development. There are a lot of keep item flows that have been really advantageous. Leif talked about a few, but some of our merchants have even innovated on that and said, hey, we want to know if a customer is purchasing from a category for the first time, and we want to call that a risk-free first purchase, where if they buy the item and they don't love it, they can get a refund without having to send the return back. And so, you sort of market that as a returnless refund. But there's a lot to do if, I think as a merchant, if you can kind of think outside the box and just put yourself in your customer's shoes and try to say, how am I going to make them feel really confident buying our product, knowing that they can count on us on the other side.
There is a Canadian paper that a couple years ago, they tracked a bunch of Amazon returns. They basically put air tags and GPS trackers in it, and they saw that so much of this stuff was wasted and it was destroyed. And not only is that bad from sustainability, but it's also bad because it puts it in the public consciousness that this is an aspect of sustainability. We have a buzzword here. It's called circularity. How is circularity important to that and to ESG scores and where this is going?
I think the brands in general are realizing, especially over the last few years, that there is more to just what I want to do in having an easy way for the customer to return the product or get a credit. Now they're saying, listen, I want to find ways to constantly adjust that strategy. So for instance, if I bought a product in the wintertime and somebody's trying to return it in the summer, return policy allows me to send it back, but now I'm selling the same product, instead of it being $100, it's $20. So let me have them just keep the product and avoid the return in the first place, saving on transportation, talking about circularity. Sustainability is another huge driver for all brands, especially Gen Z is saying, I only want to buy from brands that are very sustainability conscious. So that adds to the whole process. And if you look at where sustainability is impacted a lot today, is if 30% of all products sold, especially in the apparel and fashion area, is coming back, you want to find a way to sustainably put it back into the right channels. So all of that circularity is driven by customer demand, customer behavior, and the need for these merchants and 3PLs that support them to be able to process those items sustainably.
So, Leif, obviously you have all this pressure on you, right? We set the table there. What does that mean for you? How do you address this? How do you make sure Gen Z, doesn't think you're an enemy? How do you make sure you don't get canceled?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, we're our main division within Genesco is Journey shoes. So some of you may have bought from Journeys before, or have kids that have. So obviously they're key to our profitability and our ability to continue to be in business. So as Gaurav mentioned, we're trying to look for things and making sure that we're addressing those things. And, this sounds a little trite, but, making returns fun. I mentioned about sending, hey, maybe I bought a pair of shoes that don't fit. I want to send them to Gaurav. Post it online, put it on Instagram. We with our Gen Z customers, we have to make sure that everything that we do has a social impact, and that social message that gets out, and we want to make sure that social message is solid, and hey, come back to Journeys.
Leif, can I ask maybe a follow-up question? I'm even just super interested in sort of circularity and sustainability from the merchant side. I kind of bucket it into, there's like packaging sustainability, right? So what do we do to limit the packaging waste? Then there's like kind of freight waste and how do we minimize that with points of origin, points of destination, all that. And then I think the last one for me is like product waste and only a certain percentage of products that come back can actually be resold as new. And then you have to find something to do with the balance, I guess. Where do you see the most innovation happening amongst those three things? And maybe what are you most excited about?
Sure. Well, with having different divisions, our Journeys division is basically a reseller. So we're somewhat hamstrung by our folks that we buy from and what they want to do with their product and how they want that product reintroduced into the market. A B store, back to them, sell to a jobber, end up hopefully not in a landfill. So I think it's kind of a blend. I know that's a kind of a cop-out answer, but it's almost a blend of all three of where we have opportunity. Right now, we're still in the infancy of pursuing that. So we don't have any data or metrics on where it's going to grow. It's just, again, we've luckily got through the issues with COVID, all the returns, and now we have a system that supports us day to day, gives us that visibility. We've got our ROI in less than 7 months using the system. Now we have the ability and a platform to launch from.
There's a question here, and it's actually, my moral compass was tested recently. I had a Sony PlayStation headset, and it broke, and it'd been about a year, so I ordered a new one off Best Buy. And, for a second, I was tempted to put the broken one back in the box and send it back to Best Buy. And this question here says, how do you handle fraud with Reverselogix? How do you handle that? Well, maintain that customer experience, but obviously not getting your client ripped off. Who's got that?
I can touch that. Yeah. So if you're looking at, so the most important thing for the brand in this case that is managing the whole reverse flow of the item is they have full visibility from the point of initiation of the return request to the time it actually came back. So if you're generating an RMA through the portal, it can do things like, well, is it no fault found? If you look at electronics, for example, majority of returns are, people didn't know how to turn the item on, as an example. So if you have visibility of what's coming in, when the item arrives, if it's the same system, then you're able to see what's coming in, what condition it's in. If it's an electronic item, you can check against serial number. And if it's not, there's other ways to make sure it's not fraud. And what you're saying is pretty common. People will buy a Prada bag and send back a Prado bag, right? So those things do happen. But if you have the systems in place, it is actually quite easy to track that. A lot of our brands are now saying that, listen, they want the ability to do and open and verify because brands also want to give you the credit fast.
Sure.
Before it was like, yeah, I've got the label, I'm going to send it out, and you're going to get your credit. But 2 weeks later, you show up with the wrong product, and now you've credited the brand. So there's a lot of that comes in, but putting in place a returns management system is what we've seen for most of our customers. Give them that level of visibility and tackle things like fraud, which is a really, really big thing for most people.
That sound good to you, Leif? I saw you nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gaurav had mentioned in one of our first conversations, we were talking about leveraging stock images of shoes. So having a customer take a picture of their shoes to compare the wear and tear. And again, we want to maintain and keep our customer base as much as we can. We do get shoes back that you can tell have been worn, and so offering maybe a 50% discount on getting that product back, and then giving them using machine learning and telling them why, and then maybe even getting to the technology where our verifiers can do that from a Google Glass or some type of heads-up display. Again, leveraging the technology, reducing the amount of touches that they have to do it for the shoe, and then still pleasing the customer.
Yeah, I wanted to even chime in on that too. I think. So it happens often. Maybe I kind of in my mind bucket them in two things. There's like fraud, which we at Loop at least call like the actual like criminal fraud. Yeah. And then this bucket that I think we're talking about, at least the way I think about it, is like returns abuse.
Okay.
And I think that fraud, or as I'll call it, I guess abuse for the sake of the conversation, is like it's easy to control in a reactive sense at a merchant level. But what we're working on and starting to work on and releasing, and it's I guess interesting, like we wanted to do this back in 2019 and 20, and merchants were really against making their data available to us at a platform level to help them make smarter decisions. And now we're almost seeing the opposite. They've said, hey, we actually want, please update your information rights so that you can do this, because we're now seeing 10 million plus, we saw 10 million customers process returns through Loop or more last year. And there's some really simple abusive behaviors like repeated returns on the last day of a return policy. Like you can start to look at that and say, okay, cool, that's happening. But what we also can start to leverage is the economies of scale of the network effects of taking the reactive measures that brands take at an individual level and then applying that to behavioral patterns we see in customers across the entire network. And if there's I guess the scale of that data is, I think, a reason to sometimes I'm asked, like, why do this through a returns management solution like Reverselogix or Loop instead of something homegrown. And I think those network effects and being able to build off of the data that we have access to is going to be important in the future, because this returns abuse isn't going anywhere, and it's becoming more like we're seeing block list as a feature that we have. We're seeing merchants using that far more aggressively, and they care far more about returns abuse today than they did 12 months ago, probably orders of magnitude wise.
So, Leif, I got a question. How do you control that without pissing off the customer? You got this person. I mean, we all know sometimes there's bad. Not every customer is great. Not every customer is right. People have lied to you. Sometimes you have terrible ones who keep returning things. When's that cutoff? When does this an abusive relationship take a hike?
Yeah, it's very much now within our company. It's human. It's a human choice. If they call and get somebody at the call center and the call center is like, I'm fed up with these damn calls. Just here's their money back. Again, we want to take that and take that decision away from that emotional, potentially call center person that is having a bad day. So again, using data, leveraging data, and then allowing the customer service resource to look and say, oh yeah, okay, well this customer's a valued customer. Maybe they just had a bad day. We'll take it back. But really, the basis of it is just starting with data and making data decisions, and at least giving them something to jump from.
Just one more thing to add to that. A lot of brands will have different lenses on how do I think this is abuse or not, or fraud or not. Yeah. And based on product type, electronics is different than apparel, than something else. So I think with all the data that the systems are now being able to collect, both on the front end, there's one thing the customer is saying, I'm returning because the shoe doesn't fit. But there's something else when you receive it and you're like, well, your size 9 is actually more like a 10, and that's the reason why, right? So when you're able to correlate the data from what happened for the reason why the customer is sending the product to when you actually touch the product, what happened, that gives you a level of confidence on being able to put your strategies around what the messaging should be to that customer is one area. The other is categorization of your customer base, right? So you may be, well, it's not a repeat offender. They've had good purchase history. Someone's bought product from you, 10 items in the last year. Sure, they can get a little more lenient on the policy. Or this person has a very robust return history. Sure. Maybe they're on your shit list, right? So yeah. Those are all things, but you want to allow the brands to have the flexibility to come in and make those adjustments on the strategies in real time. And that's really where they're seeing a lot of value.
I feel like the data is an input. And then if I had a couple other things there, it's like the data plus your company's core values plus like incentive design within your CX organization. And those are like the three sort of tools you've got, because you can't, one organization is going to do different things with the data, but I think those are the buckets. Incentive design is really important for how are you comping your CX teams than your core values and the data to start with it.
So I love a good Amazon warehouse deal. I'm sure you guys do too. Or Best Buy open box, you can get really pissed deals on electronics. Sorry, I'm from Boston. So there's a question here though. It says, how do you think about growing resale and secondhand market? Sort of like those Amazon boxes. And if you're not Amazon, you're not Best Buy, how do you stand that up? How do you add that back into your network?
I feel like that's closest to you.
Yeah.
I can address that. So if you look at the trend for resale in general, in the last year, you've got companies like Real, all of these popping up. An interesting stat is 2018, the value of resale was about $13.5 billion. And in 2022, that number went to $28.5 billion worth of resale market. So that's on the rise. Last year, there's about 100 new remarketing resale programs launched by a variety of brands. You've heard most of the names. 77 of those programs were launched last year. So there's definitely a big trend that's coming up where, look, the brands are the needle movers for the most part, right? Zara decides to do free, no cost for shipping now. Everyone wants to do that, right? But on the re-commerce side, there's a big push. The market is definitely there. It's the ability, again, for you to, when you get the product back, can you remarket it very quickly? And do you have to do it just on Amazon or eBay? You can do it on your own branded site where you're saving the commissions that you have to pay to Amazon, right? So it's just a factor of strategies that you put in. But the consumers are more open to, based on the numbers I just shared, 3 years ago to now, to tap into that secondhand re-commerce sort of market.
Yeah, I think like re-commerce is a trend. I think is picking up too. Like if you just go search Google Trends, right? It's kind of crazy. But I think we used to talk about like direct to consumer, and not everybody hears direct to consumer, but in my world, we would talk about direct to consumer, and it would be like e-commerce led. And I think that's fundamentally no longer true. E-commerce is one of many channels. Amazon's another, wholesale, direct owned retail. But I think re-commerce channels are, I think we're going to see a lot more proliferation there. And they're really, at least in the startup space, there are kind of three manifestations of that today. There is like a brand owned channel. So you might still use a platform, just like you would use Loop or Reverselogix. But it would be your own channel. The second would almost be like this digital consignment marketplace, right? Where it's literally just like a consignment shop in your neighborhood where you would go drop off your items, they would sell it, and you get a cut. And then the third, and Leif, you mentioned this, I'm curious if you're seeing it and exploring it, but I think peer-to-peer is like the last bit of re-commerce. And I don't know which of those is going to take hold where, and maybe it really depends on the brands, but those are sort of like the three buckets that are happening. And that is like a channel that brands need to be investing in, I think is going to become far and far more common, because I guess the last thing on my mind with it is like, I'm from Columbus, and it's the land of like Les Wexner and The Limited and Abercrombie and Fitch and Victoria's Secret. And my wife was a merchant in that world out of school, and like, brands, even the best brands in the world, are notoriously terrible at inventory forecasting. So whether it's the items you've sold and you get back that you then need to sell, or the items that you didn't sell that you couldn't plan for effectively, finding more channels to get rid of those items and get them in customers' hands and protect your gross margin is, I think, the story of the next 3 years.
Returns up 54%, kind of as we've all alluded to. What's the quiet part, right? That means there's a hell of a lot more stuff to resell to people out there. But how about something really challenging? This is a good question. Temperature control freight, because in my head, I'm like, temperature sensitive freight, you return it, that's getting trashed no matter what, because of the risk of putting that back on a shelf, right? Is that, like, even at a grocery store, when you bring your milk up there and you say you don't want it, I used to work in one, a lot of times they wouldn't bring that milk back, they would throw it away because they don't know how long you're walking around with it. What happens to those temperature sensitive freight when you send it back? Either you guys?
I'm just glad you didn't look at me, because
Okay.
I don't have a qualified answer to that.
I'm pretty sure it gets trashed, right? I mean, that's my understanding is it would get trashed. That's a great question.
We've never sold a deal to anybody for a returns management solution with temperature controlled product. We're 0% win rate and 0% pursuit.
Wow. Smart move. Sometimes the best customer is the one you don't have, as he just said over there.
Typically, return rates on those items are generally not as high, hence platform players don't really focus on it too much. But the experience we've had is more on medical, so for customers of ours that are in the medical field, they have stuff that needs to be going temperature controlled. Generally, those are higher cost, higher value. But again, the market stat on that is a little bit on the shy side.
Returnless refunds or keep item flows come to mind there, and then making sure you understand whether these are abusive behaviors.
Is there a changing shift in categories of returns? This sort of touches on that, but this is a bit broader. It says, could you talk about the specific challenges to B2B reverse logistics and enabling new types of reverse logistics? So not just that, but we got odd sizes. We got out of dimension freight. There was a picture that went viral of a couch going up a staircase, right? And the white glove guys, they just left it. Like, what do you do next? So when we're talking about these really challenging stuff, and as this scope grows and you have to scale, how do we facilitate that?
If you're looking at B2B, that's a whole new market, which sometimes people don't focus on, but that's $1 trillion return market. We have some of our customers, one of them is Electrolux, they're the #1 appliance brand in the world. And their challenge was they were getting products back from their retailers, whether it be Best Buy, a Home Depot, or a mom and pop store in Iceland as an example. Their challenge was similar, you got to get the product back, just like you would in a consumer experience. But the way it works for them is it's millions of dollars of product coming back. And if you don't have a process to put the entitlements or claims, as they call it, right? So today, on the B2B side, one is visibility into what's coming back and getting some of your distributors to use the returns process to enforce policy. And then when those items come back with big bulky items, pallet-based versus 1Z, 2Z, then being able to go through them and systematically know, is it in return policy or not? So we're seeing quite a big push on the B2B side. Another one of our customers is a large company out of France. They do 60 million returns. I didn't even know that existed for B2B. But it's stuff that, it's not apparel, it's not jackets, like drills and all that stuff. But it's very interesting because they're putting in strategies in place around, not only do I want a normal return coming from a consumer or B2B channel, but I want to do things like a take-back program. Can I take back an item I sold to you 10 years ago, and I'll get it back so I can either use it for parts, or can I sustainably put it away? So those are some of the trends we're seeing on the B2B side.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, I guess, quickly is sometimes I think about projects you're trying to execute in your organization, and I come from a consulting background. We talk about organizational readiness, but I think of like industry or infrastructural readiness. And years ago, having freight get involved in reverse logistics and picking up from home wasn't a thing. So picking up from a business or picking up from home, and that's changing in the last 12 months. And there are freight options in reverse logistics. So I think we'll start to see, like, B2B reverse logistics was really challenging before that because it was a necessary part of the supply chain. And now that that's active, I think we'll start to see a lot of what Gaurav has seen, and that'll pick up.
So we've talked about some of the strategies, using tech, the reselling, the growing scope of this, but ultimately I want to land on sustainability here. What do we do if we can't resell it? What is the strategy here if this is just freight we can't get rid of? What do we do so that the consumer feels good, our ESG looks good, we feel good? How about Genesco?
Yeah, we're definitely exploring all those opportunities. It's obviously important to our customers, and looking to build it into every process. I think reduce handling, reduce our carbon footprint. I know I sound like I'm a talking head up here, throwing out all keywords, but definitely looking at anything and everything that we can to ensure we're being sustainable.
Is it recycling? Is it donation? Does recycling work in this category?
It does. Again, I'm taking our Journeys brand. We're really directed by our since we are a reseller. With our J&M brand, we do a lot with donations, selling and reselling, and B stores, and again trying to get the most use in life. And we've talked about the peer-to-peer stuff. So kind of looking at everything, no one strategic silver bullet to anything, just little incremental things on each area of sustainability.
We're typically seeing 4 pillars if you look at sustainability. One is around transport.
Yeah.
The second is around, can you repair the product? If you go to Europe, repairs are right as an example. So if you're able to repair products, especially in electronics, that counts back into sustainability. Packaging is something we mentioned earlier. And the last one is, can you put it away into maybe a secondary market or send it to a third world country, right? So those are really the four pillars of sustainability that we're seeing, and depends on the type of product, right? So return avoidance is probably not a strategy you may be doing for a $20 t-shirt, but if it's a $1,000 Acer laptop over there, you probably want to do things like return avoidance. So those are all strategies that people are waking up to now, and it's still very individual brand driven.
Well, we're almost out of time. I've only got about 20 seconds left for each of you. So before you all go, group didn't have they were too shy to ask a question, or they want to follow up with any of you up here. Leif, how do they get in touch with you? How do they talk to you?
Yeah, great question. You can find me, I don't know, I'm in an obnoxious gold jacket, so you can find me here, and we can chat. Twitter is probably the best place.
Nice Jordans, though.
Thanks. DMs are open. It's Poma, which is my last name, and JP, so Poma, JP on Twitter.
Yeah, happy to connect with everyone. We've got a booth 624 if you want to swing by, or reach me on LinkedIn. I can geek out with this on this with you all the time, no problem.
Sure, yeah. If you want a customer story, again, we've used Reverselogix, so I'm the only Leif Revere on LinkedIn, promise you. So definitely reach me there, or through our company website.
Cool. And if you want to talk to me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Timothy Dooner. That's Timothy Dooner, Dooner, or on Twitter at Timothy Dooner. And listen to my show, What the Truck. Thank you, Manifest, for having us. We got to return some stuff. Don't ask me, ask these guys. Thank you, guys.